Okay. Here we are once again, Embodied Business Inspired Brain Podcast. This is episode 31. It is a part 2 to episode 30, where we started talking about how fight or flight shows up in our businesses, which can be, subtle and unconscious to completely overwhelming and debilitating. And we talked a little bit about the ways in which it manifests for me and manifests for Anne. And we've been using the language a lot recently of overwhelm, because I think we are experiencing a little bit of that. The world is experiencing that. That's definitely the way folks are talking about their state of being in relationship to business. And so today we're going to be sharing some tips and tools and some strategies, three areas in particular, with you to help you navigate and diminish and prevent, ultimately, that feeling of overwhelm and fight or flight. So before we start, let's dig in to what's in process, what's in progress. And I started last time, so you're going to start this time, Anne. What's in process? What's in progress?
Oh my goodness. Well, let's see. I think there is a lot going on with, I'm thinking a lot about the holidays, and I'm thinking a lot about just wanting to dive deep into them. Because I have young children who had just happened to be at that age where the holidays are like, they just have a deep, deep meaning.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Yeah, they're like so into them. And, I had young children later in life. I became a stepmom around when I was 30, but my stepdaughter was 11 at the time. So it just wasn't quite the same as having quite youngins. So I think I'm just thinking about that ability just to dive deep. And I'm really thankful that I have a job where I'm not like, oh, I'm going to do a Thanksgiving Day morning exercise class. I always remember feeling a lot of pressure to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm coming up on almost a year anniversary of stepping out of a brick and mortar studio ownership for 20 years, and grateful every day. I admit I went through a period about a few months ago where I was feeling a little longing. I was feeling a little pang, but then it passed.
Yeah.
So I one of the things that I'm a challenge with is I don't move on from things fast enough. Can be sometimes one of my challenges. And I think that was one of them. But I think my what's in process is just grateful that I've made a big change in my life, so I can be more attentive and do the things that I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, a whole year, I can hardly believe it. It's just this year has flown by. Mm-hmm. It's flown by. I think there are two things that are really in my mind lately. One is about how to be a better communicator, and one is about how to not overburden myself attentionally or in any other ways with doing too much. And these are both things that I think a lot about, but I'm in I think a deeper relationship to both of them, where there is, it's like when you think you kind of have figured something out or you're doing a pretty good job, and then you coast for a little while, and then all of a sudden you realize, like, actually, no, you still have a lot to learn and a lot of growth to experience, which can feel incredibly disruptive from a nervous perspective. But I'm also just like really grateful, because I feel like as these things come up on a daily basis, I feel very like soft and gentle around them. Like, I'm not being hard on myself, and I'm just having the experiences I'm having and recovering very quickly, and feeling just like grateful to be older and wiser, honestly, and still be willing to be curious about my own behavior and my own choices in a way that is, just has a little bit more compassion. So I love becoming better. Like I want to be the best kind of person I can be. And it's just, I'm glad for these kinds of opportunities. And I'm just that I'm not so hard on myself anymore when that kind of deep learning comes. Yeah. So that's what's going on over here.
Self-compassion is a huge, I think it's just, I don't know if it's a combination of age. I think it's also a lot to do with the practice of the nervous system work. Because when you understand your biology, like, okay, well, that's just what happens. So it just gives you a lot of perspective.
Yeah. And so that is the perfect segue. You often do that, unbeknownst maybe. Because so we're going to be talking about when you are experiencing overwhelm in your business. And again, we're using that language because it seems to be such a common experience. It can actually send us in a lot of different directions, right? And we talked about this in episode 30, but just as a quick recap, it can send us into fight or flight. And from a polyvagal perspective, there's a hierarchy of responses in the nervous system. So we always travel from that place of ease and calm, which is a ventral perspective. It's the safety place where we can connect with others, connect with ourselves. We always travel from that place through sympathetic first, which is the fight or flight phase. And we talked last episode of like, there's a part of that phase and the kind of bandwidth of that for everybody is different, where we can have that sympathetic I can energy and still be connected until we can't. And then we're totally disconnected. We're in fight or flight. We're not behaving in the best way. We can't make decisions. We get agitated, but all these things. But we can also continue through that fight or flight phase into what's called dorsal, which is immobilization or disconnection and shutdown. So I don't want to pigeonhole anybody's experience and how they respond to overwhelm. So it can be a variety of things, but really the tips and tools are the same. And we want to talk about it from three perspectives. One, what can you do in the moment to relieve some of that dysregulation, right? And bring you back to a calmer, more steady, clear-headed, better feeling place or state. And then what can you do to like continue to shift, right? Continue to become more regulated in the short term. And so the example would be like, what could you do in the moment? What can you do later in that day or throughout the week? Because oftentimes overwhelm can come in blasts, right? Sometimes it's a long haul, and I have definitely experienced that. And I think, Anne, you've experienced that too, the duration of our children's young lives. And so it's like in the moment maintenance and then maintenance to continue. And then the third one is preventative, right? How do we gradually teach our nervous systems a different way of being, so that we are less likely to experience dysregulation, or we don't stay there as long. So my most basic in the moment strategy is just to stop. And it is not easy, but anything you can do to just pause, because the nervous system is an unconscious response system, right? So it just takes over. It can just completely take over. And it is impossible to shift out of overwhelm and dysregulation unless you stop. So my biggest piece of advice, my ultimate tip is find a way, the easiest way for you to just stop and have a moment of space. I mean, that's it. And so for a lot of our folks, and for myself included, sometimes that's literally just just close the computer, put the phone down, and take 3 deep breaths. Feel your feet in the ground. Just stop, right? Sometimes it looks like step out of the room. Like you can excuse yourself. One of our NSIF coaches in training right now was using an example yesterday of being incredibly triggered by something somebody said. And she said, I do not feel safe in this conversation, and I'm going to step outside for a moment. And you can do that. Sometimes you cannot do that. Sometimes you just remove yourself. So that's my in the moment absolute first thing to do is just stop, because stopping really is the only way to create enough space for compassion, for self-awareness, for oh, I'm having this experience and it doesn't feel good. That's it. It's just so simple. And I don't think that in the modern age and in our current cultural climate and all the things, I just don't think we just do not allow ourselves time to stop. I'm not saying stop for an hour and go for a long walk and take a bath. I mean, that's great. But it's just not, if that's what you think you have to do, you will never do it. And then we're just back to where we started. Yeah. How about for you, Anne? What is your, what do you lean into as your in the moment most supportive strategy?
Okay, my most supportive strategy is, I think it's 3 deep breaths. And that's essentially my most supportive strategy is probably what you said, is to walk outside. So the way I'm facing right now is I face the front from my home office, I face the front of my property. And so the outside is always there. So I think it's very easy for me to be like, yes, let's go outside. It's literally right there. Yeah. And I have found that to be and I think in the past, I would have been like, no, just keep working, because I can keep working. I'm sure many of you listening, hey, we can keep working, but times have shifted, perspectives around work has shifted, and just my knowledge of my ability to do really good work has shifted. Mm-hmm. And what I would add is the 3 deep breaths. So being someone who has worked in the breath industry, I suppose, breath is part of Pilates. So that's the very first thing you ever learn as a Pilates teacher is how to teach Pilates breath. So I've been teaching people how to breathe Pilates for over, close to 23 years, right? 23, 25 years. But that wasn't it. That's not the breath that I'm talking about. So I'm not, there's a way, and I remember coming across a study years ago that said, if your brain, so what they did is they took people who had been meditating, and there were people who practiced meditation daily. And then there were people who went on a 10-day silent retreat. And then they took a look at their brains to see how their brains changed over time. Mm. And the really, really positive thing is that even if you didn't have a daily meditation practice, but you had gone to a deeper dive, like a retreat of silent meditation or some sort of meditation, your brain still had changes years later. Mm. And so to me, that is so freeing, because I feel look, a daily practice that's 20 minutes long, because at least in the meditation science, that is what is the kind of the gold standard, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night, where you're going to get the best results. But I don't have that time. It's easier for me. And maybe I don't have that discipline. I have other disciplines that I do. Yeah. But it's easier. So it would probably be easier for me to say, hey, I'm going to go to a 3-day retreat, maybe 10 days might still be hard for me, but 7-day retreat, like just the logistics of leaving for that long. Like, but as things change, as people get older, things will change. But like that would probably be more in me. Like I kind of like to go deep on things. And so my point of bringing this back to the breath is like if you can give yourself an experience and truly feel how taking 3 deep breaths really can change things,
yes,
then I think it matters. But I've had people telling me to take 3 deep breaths forever, and it never worked until I really started understanding the nervous system work, practicing and being like, oh, I just experienced 3 deep breaths working, because I just feel like that. Otherwise, that piece of advice, I just feel like can fall flat. So I just want to give people that. If you've heard that advice and it's fallen flat for you, it's okay, because it fell flat for me for decades.
Yeah. I mean, you're just so smart. And it's so important, this piece of like, it's not just the 3 deep breaths, because, well, there are a couple of things that I'm thinking. Obviously, my mind is going all over the place. It is the awareness, right? It's just like, what is happening in me? How do I feel? Like, even just simply asking, like, we were having this conversation yesterday too. There's lots of ways you can check in with your nervous system state. One might be, how do I feel? One might be, what's my state? If you have that kind of, awareness and of your overall system experience. But just like the 3 deep breaths, I think if you are not paying attention to how you feel, you're right. It just can be like nonsense, right? It can just be pointless.
Well, yeah. Or like I can bring it to a sense of like, if you have had a meditation practice in the past, like I have had meditation practices off and on. And like, once you know how to meditate, you can like drop in, right? And it's easier to do it. And so with the nervous system work, it's the same thing. There's like it's like you got the on ramp now, but you have to kind of get that on ramp for yourself. And I would also relate it to like riding a bike. Like you have to learn to ride the bike, and then you can hop on it at any time and ride the thing, and you never forget it. Right? Yeah. It's there. It's this tool that you have for mobility to get around is bike riding.
Yeah. And one of the ways I think we teach people to practice this is with an if-then statement, which is not, new or unique to us, but it can be a really helpful anchor so that when you, hopefully from the last episode and for this one, you're beginning to be curious about like, well, how does overwhelm or fight or flight feel in my body? How does it express itself? How do I behave? Do I get heart racing? Do I get shortness of breath? Do I have tension, headache? Like, can I feel a headache coming on? Is my gut tied up? Am I, unable to focus? Like, there are all of these symptoms of our systems being offline because we're dysregulated. So if you pick the one that you can identify most easily, that fills in the first part. If, fill in the blank, right? If I'm feeling this way, if I notice my heart is racing, like I had this experience just last night. I get like a second wind these days. I'm not on caffeine. It's 21 days now, which is so great. And so in the afternoon later, I get like this interesting resurgence of energy, but it can be a little frenetic. It can feel a little bit like overwhelming. And I was sitting at the counter and I just noticed like, oh man, I'm having a hard time focusing. My mind was like, you've got all these things you want to do. And I have ideas and checklists and work stuff and home stuff. And I finally I was like I could almost feel like a shortness of breath and my heart starting to race. So I just was like, I stood up and I was like, whoa, I like had to stretch. I think I had this beautiful Moroccan rug in my kitchen.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'll just, I think I just, I like stretched and I was like, okay, do I need why do I need some water? Like, what is it? And I just lay down on the floor for a moment. So that for me was like the if then, like if my heart starts to race and I can't focus, then I stand up and stretch. And it's just like, that's the stopping. Like that's the noticing and that's the stopping. And there is, like Anne is talking about, this on ramp. We have to be able to begin to perceive what we're experiencing and how we can experience something different. Right? We talk about that as being discrepancy with where we are now and where we want to go, or where we have been before that we want to return to. And that's really the on ramp, right? And the other thing I was thinking when you were speaking earlier is, there is, like, I'm constantly listening to Stephen Porges talk about this work as it evolves for him and how he's teaching it. And it just always comes back to bringing the unconscious to the conscious is the first step, right? Becoming aware of how your nervous system is responding is the gateway. I mean, it is the number one thing. So if then, I would encourage you to work with that. Do you have an if then? And is it different? I mean, like, what's the if part of your then 3 deep breaths?
If I'm starting to feel scared, I think. Yeah. And I will just say, like, I've had, so I had like not gone to see an eye doctor. I don't know, like, I don't think ever I'd seen an eye doctor. Honestly, I'm like, I can see, I'm fine. I mean, I've went and saw one as a child, but I hadn't seen an optometrist. And then they were concerned I had like glaucoma or something. So they wanted to check the pressure of my eye. I'm lucky I don't, I'm fine. But I remember they were trying to like get this thing to touch my eye. And I could just feel myself tensing up. And I'm like, come on, like, you're a, 40 plus year old woman. You've had children, like, you can handle, people poking around. And I just like couldn't. It was just really tricky for me. And I was just, because you got your head in this cage.
Yeah.
And it had just never been done before. And I think the doctor probably thought I'd seen an eye doctor, like, I don't know, however many times. I guess you're supposed to see them annually, but I didn't have eye insurance for many years. So I think I just didn't. So anyways, I went and I just remember really struggling with it. And then I just employed breathing, and I employed, and then at another time, and then I had to go back and I had to do it again. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, but like, I just very quietly actually did box breathing, which is in, and it just like there in the moment, I mean, I'm not having a rational response. Like, I get it's normal and fine, but my body's like, and I know a lot of people have that on a dentist. I don't, but it was the eye doctor that I really got that around, because, they're wanting to like poke your eyeball with something. And I just have all these images of movies from the 80s of like Alien. You
didn't watch Clockwork Orange when you were a teenager.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, I just, please, like, I'm not used to this. I've never done this before.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, I literally leaned on those tools.
Yeah.
And it worked. I mean, it just, and I just quietly kind of did it so that they could do their job and not think that I was,
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing is like, we're often, that's like the result of our unconscious system activating. It's like, we might intellectually, rationally be like, I can totally handle this. Like, I've handled this workload before, or I've dealt with difficult situations before. I'm kind of turning it back toward business. And yet you're freaking out. Like, and you might just be startled by the way you're behaving and how you're feeling and like, what is happening?
So, I mean, in business, like, sometimes like we've dealt with, Chantel and I, We love to collaborate. We like to collaborate with each other. We're clearly are in collaboration with each other. And there's sometimes we're two different people. So there's push and pull. And then we also collaborate with others. And sometimes we collaborate with people who are our friends. And sometimes we collaborate with people we hire and we don't know them. And we get into a relationship with them. And it's all fine and good, but everyone's a human. And so when I'm having a difficult conversation, because I, in the past, have tended to been a person who has if I don't have to have a difficult conversation, I'm like, well, it'll be fine. But that's not a great way to be in business, right? You need to really step up and be able to have challenging conversations. So when I found myself having some conversations that felt challenging to me, I was walking a lot. And I think, people pace on the phone, right? When they're in a conversation that is a little more. So I think walking or moving, my body needed to exude the energy, the nervous energy that I was feeling, or the tension that I was feeling as I was having a conversation that was, to me, felt hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, another beautiful segue into what we can do in more of a mid-range ongoing way. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're having to have a series of difficult conversations, or you're working on a project that is, feeling laborious, or whatever it might be, we want to take these in the moment tools and we want to expand them so that we can kind of plan. We can be aware enough, oh, I'm in kind of a freaked out state, or I feel overwhelmed, or I'm having this experience. How can I manage it over the next many days or weeks? And then building in tools like talking and walking, and it doesn't have to be forever you're going to do any of this, but just being aware of what can you do easily every day. And I always tell people, start with 2 minutes. In the most supportive time of the day, do a 2-minute practice, intentionally, to be aware of your body and how it's responding, how you're feeling overall, what, how your state is expressing itself. Sometimes that happens in the morning. Sometimes it can happen before you start your work day, after a kid drop off or whatever, but just 2 minutes of something, some strategy that is repeatable. That's the point. So it doesn't have to take a long time. You don't have to meditate for 20 minutes, but what can you do to calm your system on a regular basis? Oftentimes when I am when I'm on a non-boss week, which is what we call it here when my kids are with their dad, I take a bath almost every night. And I find that is very restorative for me. And it's a way for me to settle any dysregulation that's lingering from the week before, and to optimize the clarity and work I can, and to optimize the kind of rest I can get on those weeks when I don't have the kids. So it sounds like, Anne, for you, walking is more of a mid-range strategy. Do you have other strategies that you lean into during times of overwhelm or fight or flight dysregulation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm in the moment, I tend to do more the horse lips thing. I'm a big fan of that. So in the mid-range, but I think this also bleeds into long-term, but earlier in 2023, I began finishing my showers with 3 minutes of cold water.
Yeah, perfect.
And I was being so consistent about it. And then this October, I kind of was lost my consistency. And then I was I think it was about the last 2 or 3 weeks, I'm oh, wait, I need to step up my game. And man, did I lose it bad. But I just get in there and I try to be okay, this it was not as easy. When you're consistent on it, oh, it's so simple. So that I learned through a method called the Wim Hof method. And then I also practice, he's done some of his breathing which is more of like a breathing where you are kind of inhaling a lot. So you're not, no, you're it's one or the other. It's been a while since I practiced that. But you're more hyperventilating, so you're not getting out all of your CO2. And you kind of get into what's called like a hypoxic state. But yeah, I have also found that because I have a little garden and I like to sit by my garden and do that. So that's a couple of things again, and that's outside.
Yeah.
So I think that is one blessing as well that I gained from the time of the pandemic was really appreciating the outside, reappreciating it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we do know that changing environment is a very powerful way to shift the nervous system response. Mm-hmm. And if you are working from home, taking your practice into another room or outside is really powerful. So you're not in the space where you're working, right? Well, the final thing we want to talk about is just prevention. So piggybacking on mid-range, I think the bottom line is the more familiar you get with how your nervous system responds, the more you can very clearly anticipate. You will recognize more quickly, and you will be able to apply tools more effectively so that we talk about like resilience in the nervous system as being a product of transitioning states more easily and with lower cost. So lower cost on all of our systems, right? Because they're dysregulated a lot or to extreme degrees, it's exhausting in every way, right? Mentally, emotionally, psychically, physically. So the more you employ these in the moment tools and mid-range strategies, the more it will start to build over time so that you become much more aware of your nervous system state in a variety of situations. And one of the things I really love to practice is becoming familiar with my regulated state. So I spend time. This is because it feels so good and it's so easy. I don't have to be in any place particular. Is I really like try to bring into my awareness what it feels like when I'm regulated, and I have like a list of words. And I actually was just doing this morning, like the words that describe the experience of safety and regulation, like ease or flow or calm, or like I find that when I'm really regulated and centered and in that ventral state, I just feel really happy, like giddy almost, like, and things don't push up against me. It's like a much more fluid state. And I can, because I've been practicing the work and this takes time, I have identified that, and I can like bring that quality, that awareness back into me. I mean, sometimes I can really feel it if I do a little movement or do some breath practice, but it's more like describing it or defining it so that I can anchor into it. And when I start my day, and again, I can be like on my way home from dropping off the kids and like just settling myself with a few breaths and bring those words and feelings back into mind. It can sometimes be easier to access the emotional quality of that experience. And it's almost like meditating on it. Like I'm just holding those words and emotions in my mind. But I find that it really does help me anchor into a safer ventral state. And I do it regularly, but I tend to do it more when I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, or I know I have a busy day coming, because I don't want to feel overwhelmed. I want to just do my work. And if it's busy, then it's busy. And I don't want to have a fit about it. I want to be able to do it easily. So that's my strategy for prevention, is just really becoming familiar with that safe state, the emotional, tone of that safe state, and trying to bring it in, trying to think about it. I mean, really, it just can be that simple. And over time, again, the more familiar you get, the more practice you get of like, how am I doing? And do I need to do something to shift my state? It just becomes easier and easier and compounds.
Yeah, I like how it does get easier and easier. And it does. So here's something that's gotten a lot easier for me. So um, I definitely really appreciate science and I really appreciate biology. I really appreciate understanding physiology and how the body works. And in the polyvagal theory is based on, it was originally discovered by Porges because of his love of anatomy of the vagus nerve, correct? Yeah. And then he sort of expanded on that to his theory, the polyvagal theory. But one of the things that I like so much about it is I didn't even know that you could expand joy. I didn't even know that was a possibility. So I grew up, I suppose, in a very WASP-like culture where there was a lot of hard work ethic. And in my mind, I would play when my work was done. And the problem is when you're an entrepreneur, your work is never done. Or when you're a parent, your work is it's never done, right? And so because I still held that belief, and probably in a lot of jobs, your work is never done, right? You close your computer at the end of the night and, I don't know, 500 emails are coming in through the night and you have to surf them and your Slack message is blowing up or whatever it is. Yeah, it's like you're never done, right? It's particularly in the way work is these days was all the communication channels and things like that. So that way of thinking about I will experience joy when my work is done really allowed me to never experience joy. Or not to experience joy unless, or if I was experiencing it, well, I shouldn't experience it too long because, there's still this other stuff I have to do. And so I think understanding the biological underpinnings of why experiencing joy is important was really helpful. And knowing that there's a biological connection to that, I think allowed me to say, okay, I'm going to flip this, familial story that I have, or this story about when I can feel joy and when I can't. And I really didn't want to continue that with my children. Of course, they see their father and he doesn't. I really did. I didn't want them getting that message from me. So I think a lot of times, if my kids are really experiencing joy, I'm trying to encourage them to actually not tone it down, to not stop, but to actually lean into it a little bit more.
Oh, beautiful.
And then when I have things that are happy, I'm like, this is good. And when I mentor and I coach people, I'm like, ride that wave. Don't stop it. The world is not the easiest place. And so when joy happens, I think it's really important and biologically important because when you have more joy, when the hard things happen, you at least have that joy that you've experienced to buffer you for your long-term success.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap things up, but I just want to point out, you mentioned play. And from a biological perspective, play is what's considered a neuro exercise in the polyvagal theory realm. And so it is really important. Play is a hybrid state where we are combining a sympathetic energy of fight or flight. I just think about playing tag or something, or racquetball, or something like that, where there's a lot of I can energy, but we are in total connection with other people. And it's that combination, that fostering of sympathetic and ventral connection that can teach our nervous system and our brains that it's okay to be together, to be safe with others. And it can really change our biology. And so I just wanted to piggyback on that because it's, I think something, for sure, for me too, regaining my permission to play, not just in a segmented way, like I can only play, like I have a different relationship, but similar but different to what you're describing, where it's like it can only happen in certain containers or when I feel like I'm safe. And that has lots of components to it. But yeah, well, it's a fascinating subject. I love it. It's a great conversation, and I appreciate you so much. Before we close the episode today, we want to share with you that we've got coming up something really, really cool that we want to invite you to join us for. It's a great end of the year opportunity. It's called our 5-day overwhelm cure, and it's happening December 11th through 15th. It's a 5-day masterclass with Ann and I, and we're going to be really diving into how do you get to know your nervous system? What is it telling you? And what are the strategies you can employ? We're going to focus a lot on planning for 2024 and anticipating things that you know are historically triggering or dysregulating, or things that are coming up that you are excited about, and really create a very clear plan for how to manage your nervous system and get the most out of those things, even if they might feel a little overwhelming or hard. So stay tuned. We'll have links in the show notes for you to learn more and to enroll. And we just are so thrilled to be in a position to share this work with you. Thanks. And thanks, Ann. I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Chantel. Thank you for listening.